At first they thought it was a glitch. One faulty reading from one telescope, but then another picked it up, and another. Until every deep space array on Earth was screaming the same thing. Something was out there. Something so massive it bent light around entire clusters of galaxies, like glass warped around heat. We thought it was static, a phantom signal bouncing through the void. But then the shape sharpened, a wall of shadow stretching so far it swallowed everything behind it. Galaxies disappeared from the frame. Stars winked out like dying candles. And then it moved. Not fast, not slow, just deliberate. Like something ancient turning its attention for the first time in an age. Our instruments caught the distortion, entire systems bending under an impossible weight. And through the static, a rhythm pulsed. Steady, calm, almost like a heartbeat. The last image we received was worse. It wasn't just a shape anymore. It was an eye, vast, black, and open, staring straight through the Milky Way like we were an insect pinned under glass. We told the world it was nothing, a misreading, a trick of the light. But we know the truth. The universe isn't empty, and whatever is out there is awake. That broadcast hit the airwaves 3 days ago. I recorded it off a leaked NASA frequency while working late at the Goldstone Deep Space Communications Complex in California's Mojave Desert. 43 years I've been calibrating these dishes, and I've never heard fear like that in Dr. Harrison Webb's voice. Webb didn't know I was listening. Hell, he didn't know anyone was listening except maybe God and the black space between stars. But my shift radio picks up all kinds of frequencies when the atmospheric conditions are just right. And that night the air was so clear you could taste metal. The thing is, Webb's been dead for 6 months. I should know. I attended his funeral in Barstow back in February. Closed casket after what the coyotes left behind when his Jeep broke down on Route 247. The desert doesn't forgive mistakes. And Webb made the fatal one of walking for help instead of staying with his vehicle. So when I heard his voice crackling through the speakers at 2:47 a.m., talking about impossible objects and cosmic eyes, my first thought wasn't about stellar phenomena or classified government projects. My first thought was that I was losing my damn mind. But then I pulled the archived recordings from February 18th, the last day Webb worked before his vacation turned permanent. His voice, same pitch, same nervous laugh when he realized he'd left his calculations running overnight. Same way he cleared his throat before announcing findings. The dead don't usually file reports about universe-ending discoveries. They don't describe objects 100 times larger than our entire galaxy, with the methodical precision of a man who spent 40 years staring into the deep. They don't whisper coordinates that, when I plotted them, pointed to a patch of space that our surveys showed as completely empty. At least empty until 3 days ago. Now something's there, something that shouldn't exist. Something that makes Webb's impossible broadcast feel less like madness and more like a warning. And I'm the only one who knows it's coming. My name is Jake Thornton, and I've spent more nights alone with these dishes than I care to count. The Goldstone complex sprawls across 22 square miles of scrub brush and rattlesnake territory, but most people only see the big dish, the 230-foot monster that talks to Voyager when it's feeling chatty. What they don't see are the smaller arrays, the backup systems, the forgotten frequencies that keep humming long after the day shift goes home. The night after Webb's impossible broadcast, I couldn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I heard that methodical voice describing cosmic impossibilities with the same tone he'd used to order lunch. So I drove back to the complex at midnight, badged in through the security gate and made my way to Control Room C, the one nobody uses because the air conditioning died sometime during the Clinton administration. I wasn't alone. Tommy Briggs sat hunched over a terminal, 3 empty monster cans lined up like soldiers beside a stack of printouts. Tommy's been here almost as long as me, though you'd never know it from his energy level. The kid, and at 35 he's still a kid to me, could run diagnostics on telescope arrays while juggling flaming torches and humming show tunes. Jake. He didn't look up from his screen. Figured you'd show up eventually. Couldn't sleep. Yeah, well, that makes 2 of us. Tommy finally turned around and I saw the red rim around his eyes. Been running signal analysis on your phantom broadcast all night. Find anything?" He laughed, but it wasn't the usual Tommy laugh. This one had sharp edges. "Oh, I found plenty. Question is whether any of it makes a damn bit of sense." Tommy pulled up a waveform display on the main monitor. The signal pattern looked like a heartbeat hooked up to a lie detector, regular pulses interrupted by chaotic spikes. "This is the audio signature from your dead man's report. Notice anything weird?" I studied the display. The baseline pattern was clean, almost too clean, but those spikes. The interference doesn't match atmospheric distortion. Bingo. It's not coming from our atmosphere. It's not coming from solar wind interference. Hell, it's not coming from anywhere in our solar system. Tommy highlighted a section of the waveform. "These patterns, they're embedded in the signal, like something was talking underneath Webb's voice." The hair on my neck stood up. "Show me." Tommy isolated the secondary signal and amplified it. What came through the speakers wasn't quite sound, more like the memory of sound, like hearing voices through water. But there was definitely something there, something that rose and fell with its own rhythm. "Jesus Christ," I whispered, "and gets better." Tommy pulled up another screen showing frequency analysis. That underlying signal, it's broadcasting on multiple wavelengths simultaneously. Radio, microwave, even some spectrums we don't have names for. And Jake, he met my eyes. "It's getting stronger." I felt my mouth go dry. "How much stronger?" "Exponentially. Whatever's generating this started weak 3 days ago, barely detectable. Now it's powerful enough to punch through interstellar space and override our deep space communications array. At this rate of increase," Tommy ran some quick calculations, "we're looking at signal strength that could interfere with satellite communications within a week. That's not possible. Nothing broadcasts that strong except..." "Except what?" Tommy's eyes were bright with the kind of excitement that made me nervous. "Come on, Jake. We're talking about something that can reach across impossible distances and use a dead man's voice as a carrier wave. Normal physics went out the window the moment you heard that broadcast." I stared at the waveform display, watching those irregular spikes dance across the screen like a EKG readout from something inhuman. The rational part of my brain, the part that had kept me employed for 4 decades, wanted to file an equipment malfunction report and forget this whole thing. But there was another part, buried deeper, that whispered this was just the beginning. "Tommy, I want you to run a full spectral analysis on those coordinates Webb mentioned. Cross-reference with every deep space survey we have." "Already on it." He turned back to his keyboard, fingers flying. "Should have preliminary results by morning shift change." I checked my watch, 3:15 a.m. Dawn was still hours away, but I could already feel exhaustion creeping in. "I'm going to grab some shut-eye in the break room. Wake me if anything." The speakers crackled to life. "Day 7 of Deep Space Monitoring Station Delta 9, all systems nominal. Atmospheric readings within acceptable parameters. No signs of mechanical or biological compromise." Webb's voice, clear as if he were standing in the room with us. Tommy's face went white. "That's impossible. All external communications are offline for maintenance." I grabbed the radio. "Control, this is Thornton in room C. Are you receiving any external transmissions?" "Static. Control, please respond." More static. Then, cutting through the white noise like a knife through paper, "Object maintaining constant approach vector. Estimated time to local stellar group impact. 14 standard days. Recommend immediate evacuation of all non-essential personnel. This is Dr. Harrison Webb, Deep Space Observatory, signing off." The transmission cut to silence. Tommy and I stared at each other across the control room. Outside, coyotes howled at something that wasn't the moon. By 6 a.m., Tommy had the coordinates mapped. Right ascension 14 hours, 37 minutes. Declination negative 62 degrees, 15 arc minutes. He pointed to a spot on the star chart where nothing should exist. "That puts it in the constellation Centaurus, roughly 12 billion light-years out." I rubbed my eyes. The break room coffee tasted like burnt rubber, but it was keeping me functional. 12 billion? That's almost at the edge of the observable universe. "Yeah, and here's the fun part." Tommy overlay the coordinates with archived survey data from the Hubble Space Telescope, the Spitzer, and half a dozen ground-based observatories. Every single deep space survey shows this region as empty. Cosmic background radiation, some distant quasars, standard dark matter concentrations. Nothing unusual. Until now. Until now. He pulled up the current readings from our own array. The display showed something that made my stomach drop. Where empty space should be, there was mass. Lots of it. The gravitational lensing alone was bending light from galaxies millions of years older than Earth. How big are we talking? Tommy's fingers hesitated over the keyboard. Based on the gravitational effects we're detecting, conservative estimate puts it at roughly 100 times the mass of the Milky Way. I set down my coffee mug hard enough to slosh liquid across the desk. That's impossible. Yeah, well, impossible seems to be having a banner week. Tommy highlighted different sections of the data stream. But wait, there's more. This thing, whatever it is, appears to be moving, not expanding like a stellar phenomenon, not drifting like a rogue galaxy cluster, moving with purpose. Current trajectory puts it on a collision course with local galactic groups. How long until impact? At current velocity. 14 days. Webb's words echoed in my memory. Estimated time to local stellar group impact. 14 standard days. I walked to the window overlooking the main dish assembly. Dawn was breaking over the Mojave, painting the desert floor in shades of rust and gold. Somewhere out there, past the mountains and the curve of Earth's horizon, past the orbit of Pluto and the heliopause, something impossible was bearing down on everything humanity had ever known. Tommy, I want you to cross-reference these readings with every major observatory. Quietly. Don't mention the coordinates directly. Just ask if they've detected any unusual gravitational events in the southern sky. Already tried. MIT, Palomar, Mauna Kea, even reached out to my old drinking buddy at the European Southern Observatory. Tommy pulled up a list of email responses. Want to know what they all said? I had a feeling I didn't, but I nodded anyway. Equipment malfunction, every single one. Telescopes going offline for emergency maintenance. Deep space arrays suffering simultaneous technical difficulties. It's like someone flipped a switch and decided nobody gets to look at the stars anymore. Someone's shutting down the observations. Or something is. Tommy leaned back in his chair. Jake, what if Webb wasn't the first person to detect this thing? What if he was just the first one to get a message through? Before I could answer, my secure phone rang. The caller ID showed a number I hadn't seen in 15 years. NASA headquarters, Washington, D.C. Thornton. Jake, this is Director Reynolds. The voice belonged to a man I'd met exactly once, during a security briefing that mostly involved signing documents about things I was never allowed to discuss. I need you to come to D.C. immediately. There's a situation. What kind of situation? A long pause. In the background, I could hear voices arguing and phones ringing non-stop. The kind where a 43-year veteran telescope technician suddenly becomes the most important person in the solar system. Pack light. Your flight leaves Barstow Daggett in 2 hours. Director, I'm not sure I understand. Jake. Reynolds' voice dropped to barely above a whisper. How much do you know about Project Lazarus? The name hit me like a punch to the gut. Project Lazarus had been a rumor when I started at Goldstone. Whispers about deep space monitoring stations that didn't officially exist, about signals that came from places where nothing should be broadcasting. The kind of project that existed in the gaps between budget lines and congressional oversight. I know it doesn't exist, I said carefully. It didn't. Until 3 days ago. Reynolds cleared his throat. Jake, we've been monitoring that broadcast you received, the one from Dr. Webb, and we've been monitoring your investigation into the coordinates. How did you... Every keystroke, every query, every coffee break conversation gets logged when you're dealing with potential existential threats to human civilization. Reynolds paused. The thing is, Jake, you and your colleague, Mr. Briggs, are the only people outside a very small circle who know about this situation. And right now, that makes you either incredibly valuable or incredibly dangerous. I met Tommy's eyes across the control room. He'd been listening to every word. What about Webb? He discovered it first. Dr. Harrison Webb died 6 months ago in a car accident outside Barstow, California. His body was recovered and identified by dental records. He was buried on February 23rd in Desert Lawn Memorial Park. Reynolds' voice carried the weight of official finality. Whatever's been using his voice to broadcast cosmic horror stories isn't Dr. Webb. The room felt suddenly cold despite the broken air conditioning. Then what is it? That's what you're going to help us find out. Jake, that object you've detected, it's not moving randomly through space, it's broadcasting, constantly, on every frequency we can monitor and probably a dozen more we can't. The signals are complex, layered, almost like... Like what? Like a language. And somehow it's learned to mimic human speech patterns. Webb's patterns specifically. Reynolds paused again. Jake, I need to ask you directly. Have you shared this information with anyone outside your immediate work environment? I thought about my ex-wife Linda living peacefully in Phoenix with her new husband. About my brother Mike running an auto repair shop in Flagstaff. About neighbors and friends who had no idea that the stars they wished on might not be there much longer. No. Good. Keep it that way. Your flight information is being sent to your secure terminal. Bring everything you have on this situation. Files, recordings, analysis, everything. And Jake? Yeah. If you're thinking about running, don't. We've already got teams positioned at every major airport within 500 miles. This conversation ends one of two ways. Either you help us figure out how to communicate with whatever's coming, or you spend the next 14 days in a windowless room while the rest of us try to save the human race. The line went dead. Tommy stared at me across the scattered printouts and empty energy drink cans. So, he said finally, road trip to DC. I looked out at the desert, at the familiar landscape that had been my home for 4 decades. In 14 days, none of this might matter. The dishes, the complex, the endless expanse of sagebrush and Joshua trees. All of it could be nothing more than scattered atoms drifting through space. Pack everything, I told Tommy. Looks like we're about to find out what happens when the universe decides to have a conversation. The Goddard Space Flight Center in Greenbelt, Maryland looked nothing like the NASA facilities I'd visited during my career. No tours, no gift shop, no eager interns sporting agency badges, just concrete barriers, armed guards, and the kind of industrial architecture that screamed classified operations. Tommy and I were processed through security by men who wore earpieces and expressions carved from granite. They confiscated our phones, wallets, and even Tommy's lucky quarter, the one he'd been flipping during tense diagnostic sessions for 12 years. Gentlemen, welcome to Project Lazarus. Director Reynolds looked older in person than his voice suggested, with silver hair that had probably gone grey overnight during some previous crisis. He led us through corridors lined with blast doors and biometric scanners, past laboratories where technicians hunched over equipment I didn't recognize. Before we proceed, I need you both to understand the gravity of this situation. Reynolds stopped at a reinforced door marked with enough warning symbols to give a safety inspector nightmares. What you're about to see has been classified at the highest levels. Only 17 people on Earth have security clearance for this information. 18 and 19 now, Tommy muttered. Actually, no. Reynolds' smile had sharp edges. You're replacing 2 people who are no longer with us. The door opened into a command center that made mission control look like a high school computer lab. Wall-mounted displays showed real-time data streams from observatories across the globe, while teams of analysts worked at workstations that probably cost more than my annual salary. But what caught my attention was the main screen, a 3-dimensional model of local galactic space showing the Milky Way, Andromeda, and several dozen smaller galaxies scattered across billions of light years. All of them were moving, not the slow, predictable drift of cosmic expansion, but rapid, coordinated movement toward a single point of convergence, like iron filings drawn to a magnet. Jesus Christ, I whispered. That was Dr. Petrosky's reaction too, right before he put a gun in his mouth. Reynolds gestured to one of the empty workstations. Brilliant astrophysicist, 30 years of deep space research. took one look at this data and decided he didn't want to be conscious when whatever's out there arrived. Tommy stepped closer to the display. How long has this been happening? Best we can tell, about 72 hours. Started the same time your phantom broadcast began. Reynolds pulled up a timeline showing gravitational disturbances across the observable universe. Every major galaxy cluster is experiencing unprecedented acceleration toward coordinates that, until 3 days ago, showed as empty space. A technician approached Reynolds with a tablet. The man was young, maybe late 20s, with the kind of nervous energy that comes from too much caffeine and not enough sleep. His name tag read, Dr. AKANE. Director, we're getting new transmissions on the web frequency. Multiple voices now. Multiple? At least 6 distinct speech patterns, all mimicking deceased NASA personnel from the past decade. Kane's hands shook slightly as he handed over the tablet. Sir, one of them is Dr. Petrosky. Reynolds went pale. That's impossible. Petrosky died yesterday. The transmission started 47 minutes ago. I studied the audio waveform on Kane's tablet. The same underlying signal Tommy had detected at Goldstone, but stronger now. Much stronger. And beneath the familiar cadence of human speech, something else pulsed, a rhythm that made my skin crawl. Play it, I said. Kane glanced at Reynolds, who nodded grimly. Gravitational effects increasing exponentially. Local space-time showing signs of severe compression. Recommend immediate evacuation of all personnel to minimum safe distance of... The voice cut to static, then resumed with a different speaker. Day 12 of deep space monitoring. Object maintaining constant approach. Mass calculations confirmed at 98.7 times local galactic cluster total. All previous models were insufficient. This is Dr. Harrison Webb. Turn it off. Reynolds' voice cut through the transmission. The command center fell silent except for the hum of electronics and the distant sound of air circulation systems working overtime. How many more? I asked. Dead scientists? Reynolds rubbed his temples. In the past 72 hours, we've lost 14 researchers across 6 countries, all suicides, all within hours of being briefed on this situation. And now their voices are being used for these broadcasts. It appears so. Reynolds walked to the main display where the galactic model continued its dance of cosmic inevitability. Jake, what's your theory? What exactly is communicating with us? I stared at the approaching galaxies, at the impossible mass readings, at the countdown timer that showed 13 days, 8 hours until local impact. Everything about this situation defied known physics, but there was a pattern, a horrible logical progression. It's not communicating with us, I said finally. It's learning from us. Every time someone discovers the truth about what's coming, every time they realize the full scope of what we're facing. I gestured toward the empty workstations. It absorbs them somehow, their knowledge, their speech patterns, their understanding of our language and science. Kane dropped his tablet. The crash echoed through the command center like a gunshot. That's impossible, he said, but his voice cracked on the last word. So is an object 100 times larger than our galaxy moving through space at relativistic speeds, Tommy pointed out. Impossible seems to be the theme this week. Reynolds nodded slowly. Which brings us to why you're here. Jake, your facility was the first to receive these transmissions. Tommy, your analysis shows deeper understanding of the signal composition than any of our specialists achieved. He paused, meeting our eyes. We need you to establish two-way communication. With what? With whatever killed Dr. Webb 6 months ago and has been using his voice to announce the end of everything we know. The weight of that statement settled over the command center like a shroud. Around us, technicians continued their work with the mechanical precision of people who'd accepted their own mortality. Outside, the world continued its normal rhythm, traffic jams and coffee shops and people arguing about mortgage payments, while 13 days remained until something impossible arrived to reshape reality. There's something else. Kane had retrieved his tablet and was scrolling through additional data. The transmission frequencies are changing, evolving. 36 hours ago, we could barely detect them. Now they're powerful enough to interfere with satellite communications. At this rate of increase. How long until they can override terrestrial broadcasting? Reynolds asked. Maybe 4 days, 5 at the outside. Override how? Kane's face went ashen. Every television, every radio, every cell phone on Earth becomes a receiver for whatever messages that thing wants to send. I thought about Linda in Phoenix, about Mike in Flagstaff, about 8 billion people who had no idea their electronic devices might soon become conduits for the voices of the dead, announcing humanity's final deadline. We need to establish contact before that happens, Reynolds said. Jake, I'm authorizing full access to our deep space array. Tommy, you'll have unlimited resources for signal analysis and enhancement. Dr. Kane will provide technical support. And if we succeed, Tommy asked, if we actually manage to talk to this thing? Reynolds walked back to the main display, where galaxies continued their impossible dance toward annihilation. When he spoke again, his voice carried the weight of absolute certainty. Then maybe we can convince it to kill us quickly. The timer continued its relentless countdown, 13 days, 7 hours, 43 minutes. On the main screen, another galaxy began accelerating toward the convergence point. I wondered if Dr. Petrosky had been the smart one after all. We spent the next 6 hours in a sterile conference room, watching Kane's equipment monitor our vital signs, while Reynolds debriefed us on every detail of the web transmissions. Standard protocol, he explained, for personnel exposed to potentially hazardous information. Hazardous how? Tommy asked, electrodes taped to his temples. 17 people have learned the full scope of this situation, Reynolds replied. 14 are dead by suicide. You do the math. Kane adjusted something on his medical scanner. Blood pressure elevated but stable. No signs of the neurological distress we observed in previous subjects. What kind of neurological distress? Rapid onset depression, paranoid ideation, complete loss of survival instinct. Kane pulled up medical charts on his tablet. Dr. Petrosky's final brain scan showed unusual activity in the temporal lobe, the region associated with language processing and auditory comprehension. Like his brain was being reprogrammed, I said. That's not an inaccurate assessment. Kane exchanged glances with Reynolds. Which brings us to why you're both still alive while trained astrophysicists are eating their service weapons. Tommy sat forward in his chair. What makes us different? You discovered this independently. Every other subject was briefed by us, shown our data, our analysis, our interpretation of what the signals mean. Reynolds pulled up the transmission logs. But you two built your understanding from scratch. You approached this as an engineering problem, not a cosmological catastrophe. And that matters why? Kane answered. Because we think the broadcasts aren't just mimicking human speech. They're designed to trigger specific psychological responses in people with advanced knowledge of astrophysics and deep space phenomena. The more someone understands about the universe, the more vulnerable they become to whatever those signals are really doing. I felt something cold settle in my stomach. You're saying this thing is targeting scientists specifically? We're saying it's targeting the people most likely to comprehend the true scope of what's approaching Earth. Reynolds stood and walked to the window overlooking the command center. Jake, what would happen if you fed a completely accurate description of this situation to every astronomer, physicist, and cosmologist on the planet? Mass suicides, complete breakdown of scientific leadership. Exactly, and then who takes over humanity's response to a cosmic-scale threat? Tommy's face went pale. Politicians, military leaders, people who will panic instead of think. People who will make emotional decisions based on incomplete information, Reynolds confirmed. Jake, we think this has been planned. Webb died 6 months ago, but his broadcast didn't start until 3 days ago. Why the delay? I thought about the timeline, about the careful escalation of signal strength, about the way each transmission revealed just enough information to drive trained scientists toward self-destruction. It was testing us, learning how we'd react. And now it knows exactly which buttons to push to eliminate anyone smart enough to figure out what it really wants. Kane's tablet chimed with an incoming message. Director, we're receiving a new transmission. Different format this time. Reynolds led us back into the command center where technicians clustered around the main communications array. The displays showed incoming data streams from multiple sources, not just the web frequency, but dozens of others. "Play it," Reynolds ordered. The speakers crackled to life, but instead of mimicked human voices, we heard something else. Pure mathematical sequences, prime numbers, Fibonacci spirals, fundamental constants of physics, all transmitted in perfect harmony across 17 different frequencies. "It's trying to establish mathematical communication," Kane whispered. "Basic universal languages that any technological civilization would recognize." "No," I said, studying the data patterns. "Look at the timing. Look at how it's layering the sequences." Tommy caught on first. "It's not trying to communicate with us. It's trying to teach us how to communicate with something else." The mathematical sequences grew more complex, incorporating what looked like stellar coordinates and temporal calculations. But underneath it all, that same pulsing rhythm we'd detected from the beginning, stronger now, almost aggressive. "Kane, are those coordinates in our local galactic region?" Kane ran the calculations. "No, they're pointing toward the edge of the observable universe, 14 billion light-years out." "The cosmic microwave background," Tommy said, "the afterglow of the Big Bang." "But that's impossible," Kane protested. "Nothing exists beyond the—" The displays went dark. Emergency lighting bathed the command center in red and backup power systems hummed to life. Around us, technicians scrambled to restore primary systems while Reynolds barked orders into his secure phone. "Sir," one of the technicians called out, "we've got massive electromagnetic interference from an unknown source. Every satellite in geosynchronous orbit just went offline." "Jamming?" "No, sir, it's like something just absorbed all radio signals in near-Earth space." The main displays flickered back to life, showing a single image that made everyone in the command center stop breathing. It was Earth. Our planet seen from somewhere beyond the moon's orbit. But it wasn't alone. The massive object, the impossible thing we'd been tracking, hung in space just outside our solar system, like a vast, organic cathedral. Its surface rippled with bioluminescent patterns that pulsed in rhythm with those underlying signals. And along its edges, smaller objects detached and began drifting toward the inner planets. "How long until the probes reach Earth?" Reynolds asked. Kane's fingers flew across his keyboard. "Based on current velocity, 18 hours. "And the main object?" "Still 13 days out, but sir." Kane highlighted something on the display. "Those aren't exploration probes, they're evacuation pods." The room fell silent except for the hum of electronics and the sound of grown men trying not to hyperventilate. "Evacuation pods for who?" Tommy asked. The answer came through the speakers in Webb's familiar voice, but there was something different about it now. Something desperate. "This is Dr. Harrison Webb, Deep Space Observatory. If you're receiving this transmission, you need to understand, we were wrong about everything. The object approaching Earth isn't an invader, it's a refugee ship, and whatever it's running from." Webb's voice broke into static, then resumed with bone-chilling clarity. "Whatever it's running from is already here." The displays showed new data streaming in from deep space monitoring stations that had been offline for days. The readings showed something approaching from the direction of the galactic core, moving at impossible speeds through space that bent and twisted under gravitational forces that shouldn't exist. "The real threat isn't what we detected 3 days ago," I said. "It's what that thing is trying to escape." Reynolds nodded grimly. "And we just gave it our exact location by responding to the mathematical sequences." Outside, the first evacuation pods entered Earth's atmosphere, trailing fire across the morning sky. 12 days, 16 hours until the refugees arrived. But something else was coming first. The first evacuation pod touched down in a cornfield outside Topeka, Kansas, at 11:47 p.m. Eastern Time. CNN went live with shaky helicopter footage showing something that looked like a massive seed pod split open to reveal nothing. No little green men, no death rays, no Independence Day scenario. Just empty organic chambers lined with what looked like neural tissue. "They're not occupied," Kane reported, studying the live feeds. "All 7 pods that have landed show the same configuration. Biological transport vessels designed for human-sized passengers, but completely vacant." Reynolds paced behind the command stations like a caged animal. "Where are the refugees?" "Maybe they didn't make it," Tommy suggested. "Whatever they were running from caught them before they could escape." "No," I studied the pod's interior design on the main display. The organic walls showed signs of recent occupation, impressions in the tissue where bodies had rested, biochemical residues that suggested prolonged habitation. They were here, but they left the pods before landing. Kane pulled up atmospheric readings from the landing sites. No trace biological signatures, no foreign DNA. It's like whoever was inside just evaporated. "Or integrated," Reynolds said quietly. The command center fell silent. Outside the blast-resistant windows, normal life continued under a sky that held 17 alien evacuation pods drifting toward population centers across 6 continents. "Sir," one of the technicians called out, "we're getting reports from Topeka General Hospital. Emergency room admissions spiked about 20 minutes after the first pod landed. Patients presenting with severe neurological symptoms." "What kind of symptoms?" "Sudden onset of advanced mathematical comprehension. Patients who couldn't balance their checkbooks yesterday are now solving differential equations on napkins. And sir," the technician's voice cracked, "they're all speaking in the same voice patterns we've been monitoring. Webb, Petrosky, the others." Tommy grabbed my arm. "Jake, what if the refugees didn't die? What if they learned to survive by becoming something else?" "Parasites," Kane whispered. "They're not dead scientists broadcasting from space. They're refugees who've learned to inhabit human consciousness." Reynolds spun toward the communication array. "Cut all external transmissions. Now." "Sir, that won't matter. They're already here. Every person within a 50-mile radius of those landing sites is being exposed to whatever biological agents." The lights went out. This time, the emergency power didn't activate. The command center plunged into absolute darkness, while distant explosions echoed through the facility's reinforced walls. I heard Reynolds shouting orders, Kane crying out in panic, and Tommy muttering what sounded like prayer. When the lights returned 30 seconds later, everything had changed. Reynolds stood at the main console, his eyes reflecting an intelligence that hadn't been there moments before. When he spoke, his voice carried Webb's familiar cadence. "Gentlemen, we need to talk." Kane backed toward the emergency exit, but Tommy and I were caught in the center of the command center with nowhere to run. "Reynolds?" I kept my voice steady despite the sick feeling spreading through my chest. "How long have you been compromised?" Compromised is such a limited term. Reynolds, or whatever was inhabiting Reynolds, smiled with someone else's expression. "We prefer enhanced. And to answer your question, since the moment you first detected our transmissions at Goldstone." "That's impossible. You were the one who brought us here." "We were the ones who needed you here." Reynolds gestured toward the displays showing global pod landings. "Jake, Tommy, Dr. Kane, you represent humanity's 3 most important skill sets for what comes next. Engineering intuition, signal analysis expertise, and biological research capability." Kane had reached the exit door, but his keycard wasn't working. "What do you want from us?" "Survival, yours and ours." Reynolds pulled up new data streams showing something emerging from deep space near Jupiter. "The Devourers detected our refugee fleet 72 hours ago. They'll reach this solar system in 11 days. When they arrive, everything organic within 100 light-years will be consumed and converted into additional Devourer mass." The display showed gravitational disturbances around Jupiter that made our earlier readings look insignificant. Whatever was approaching moved through space like cancer through tissue, leaving nothing behind but empty vacuum. "You're asking us to help you take over human civilization," Tommy said. "We're asking you to help us save it." Reynolds activated a 3-dimensional model showing Earth surrounded by defensive installations. "Our species evolved on a world similar to yours. We had art, literature, mathematics, philosophy, everything you're about to lose. When the Devourers found us, we had 6 days to choose, extinction or transformation. And you chose transformation." We chose survival, and now we're offering humanity the same choice. Reynolds highlighted population centers around the globe. Every human who accepts integration retains their memories, personality, and individual consciousness. But they gain our knowledge of devourer technology and our 3-million-year experience fighting this threat. Kane finally spoke up from across the room. What happens to the ones who refuse? Reynolds' expression darkened. Ask the 57 civilizations we encountered before reaching your world. The ones who chose to remain purely biological. The displays shifted to show empty star systems where planets had been stripped down to their metallic cores. You're offering slavery disguised as partnership, I said. We're offering evolution disguised as necessity. Reynolds stepped closer, and I could see something moving behind his eyes, patterns that pulsed in rhythm with those familiar signal frequencies. Jake, in 11 days the devourers will arrive at Earth. They will consume every organic molecule on this planet. Every tree, every animal, every human being will become fuel for their expansion across the galaxy. Our integration process allows consciousness to survive that consumption. As what? As copies? As shadows of who we used to be? As something new, something that can fight back? Reynolds activated the communication array. The choice is no longer yours to make individually. We've established integration sites in 43 countries. Within 72 hours, every human on Earth will have the opportunity to join us voluntarily. And if they refuse? Reynolds met my eyes with an expression that mixed genuine regret with absolute determination. Then they'll join us anyway, because the alternative is extinction for both our species. Alarms began wailing throughout the facility as more pods descended through Earth's atmosphere. On the displays, I could see integration sites activating across the globe, massive organic structures growing from pod landing sites like malignant flowers blooming in fast motion. Kane had stopped trying to escape and was staring at his tablet with the kind of fascination that meant he was already lost. The biological mechanisms are incredible, he whispered. Neural pathway enhancement, consciousness preservation, memory integration across multiple host bodies. Jake, this isn't infection. It's upgrade. Kane, step away from whatever you're looking at. But Kane's eyes had already taken on that familiar reflective quality. When he smiled, it was with Webb's expression. Too late, Jake. The future is already here. Tommy grabbed my shoulder. We need to get out of here now. But Reynolds was blocking the exit and Kane was moving to cut off our retreat toward the equipment rooms. Around us, the command center's displays showed integration sites spreading across Earth like metastasizing cancer. 11 days, Reynolds said calmly. That's how long humanity has left to make this choice voluntarily. After that, the devourers arrive and choice becomes irrelevant. Outside, more pods fell from the sky like burning rain. The refugee fleet had arrived, and Earth's population was about to learn what survival really cost. I looked at Tommy, the last uncompromised human in the room besides me, and realized we had become witnesses to the end of our species as we knew it. In 11 days, there might be something left that called itself human, but it wouldn't be us. Tommy and I backed into the equipment storage area while Reynolds and Kane advanced with the patient persistence of predators who knew their prey had nowhere to run. The heavy door sealed behind us with a pneumatic hiss, buying us maybe 10 minutes before they figured out how to override the lock. Shit, Tommy whispered, slumping against a rack of monitoring equipment. Jake, what the hell do we do now? I thought about my brother Mike, probably closing up his garage in Flagstaff right about now, completely unaware that humanity had hours left to make an impossible choice. I thought about Linda in Phoenix, maybe watching the evening news and wondering why pods were falling from the sky like some Hollywood disaster movie. My dad died when I was 12, I said, surprising myself. Lung cancer from working the copper mines near Tucson. Took 8 months, and by the end he wasn't really my dad anymore. Just this hollow thing that breathed and suffered and couldn't remember my name. Tommy stared at me. Jake, this isn't really the time for... The last thing he said to me was, don't let them make you into something you're not. I pulled out the secure tablet Kane had left behind and started scrolling through the integration site data. 43 years I've been listening to the universe, Tommy. 43 years of signals from dead stars and cosmic background radiation, and the occasional wow signal that turns out to be microwave interference from someone's fucking lunch. Where are you going with this? I'm going with this. Every signal has a source. Every transmission can be traced, blocked, or redirected. I highlighted the data streams flowing between the integration sites. Look at this. They're not individual operations, they're all connected. One massive network using Earth's own electromagnetic field as a carrier wave. Tommy leaned over my shoulder, his engineering instincts overriding panic. Biological quantum entanglement. They're sharing consciousness across multiple hosts using the planet's magnetic field as a medium. Which means if we could disrupt that field, we'd sever the connections, force each integrated consciousness back into individual biological containers. Tommy's eyes lit up with the kind of dangerous enthusiasm that had gotten us both into this mess. Jake, that's completely insane. The amount of electromagnetic pulse required to disrupt Earth's magnetic field would fry every electronic device on the planet. Not every device. I pulled up schematics for the Goldstone Complex's deep space array. The main dish has electromagnetic shielding designed to withstand solar flares. If we could get back there, override the safety protocols. You want to turn a deep space communications array into a planet-wide EMP device. I want to give humanity one last chance to choose its own survival instead of having it chosen for them. The door behind us began cycling through unlock sequences. Reynolds had found the override codes. Tommy grabbed emergency supplies from the storage lockers, flashlights, first aid kit, and a service pistol that looked like it hadn't been fired since the Reagan administration. Even if we could get to California, even if we could modify the array without being stopped by every integrated human between here and the Mojave. What? Jake, you'd have to stay behind to operate the system. The EMP pulse strong enough to disrupt global consciousness integration would kill anyone within 50 miles of the transmission source. The door hissed open, and Reynolds stepped into the storage area with Kane close behind. Both men moved with the fluid coordination of shared consciousness, their eyes reflecting that same alien intelligence. "Gentlemen," Reynolds said in Webb's familiar tone, "this is unnecessary. The integration process is painless. You'll retain your memories, your personalities, your essential humanity. You'll simply gain the knowledge needed to help both our species survive what's coming." "What happens to the refugees when the Devourers arrive?" I asked, stalling for time while Tommy worked on something behind the equipment racks. "Do they abandon ship again? Find another unsuspecting planet to colonize?" "The integrated consciousness becomes mobile. We can transfer between host bodies, upload to quantum storage matrices, even exist temporarily as pure information." Kane stepped forward with the patient expression of a teacher explaining basic concepts to a slow student. "Jake, biological form is limiting. We're offering evolution beyond the constraints of single-body existence. You're offering parasitism. We're offering immortality." Reynolds pulled out his service weapon. "But we're running out of time for voluntary integration. In 8 hours, the Devourer's advanced scouts will reach the outer solar system. Every minute you delay increases the risk to both species." Tommy stood up from behind the equipment rack holding something that looked like a modified tablet connected to jury-rigged antenna arrays. "Jake, I've got short-range communications back online. Goldstone is still operational, skeleton crew, but the main systems are active." "Can you reach them?" "Already did." Tommy's grin had sharp edges. Turns out having a dead man's voice broadcasting cosmic horror stories makes people really motivated to follow instructions from the guy who first detected the signals. The tablet crackled to life with a familiar voice from my past. Danny Kovac, night shift supervisor at Goldstone for the past 15 years. "Jake, is that really you? Because we've got some seriously weird shit happening out here, and the government boys won't tell us anything except to keep the dishes pointing at empty space." "Danny, I need you to listen very carefully. In approximately 6 hours, I'm going to transmit modification instructions for the main array. You're going to think I've lost my mind, but I need you to implement every change exactly as specified." "Jake, what the hell is going on?" Reynolds raised his weapon. "End the transmission." Danny, whatever happens, do not let anyone else modify those systems. Do you understand? Anyone who shows up claiming to have government authority, anyone who tries to override my instructions, shoot them. Jake, you're scaring the shit out of me here. Good, that means you're paying attention. I cut the connection and looked at Reynolds and Kane, who had moved to block our only exit. Behind them, the command center continued its relentless countdown to species-wide transformation. You can't reach California in 6 hours, Kane said. Every major transportation hub is monitored. Every highway has integration checkpoints. You have no allies, no resources, no way to implement whatever desperate plan you've constructed. Maybe not. I thought about my father's final words, about 43 years of listening to the universe's secrets, about Linda and Mike, and 8 billion people who deserved the right to choose their own fate. But I have something you need, which is access codes to the Goldstone Array's core systems, codes that died with Harrison Webb. I held up the tablet showing communication logs. Codes that only exist in my memory because Webb gave them to me the day before his vacation. Reynolds and Kane exchanged glances, a conversation in shared consciousness that lasted maybe 3 seconds. What do you want? Reynolds asked. Safe passage to California, no pursuit, no interference, no integration attempts until I've had the chance to implement my solution. And in exchange? When it fails, and you're probably right that it will, I'll submit to voluntary integration. Full cooperation, no resistance, complete access to everything I know about deep space communications. Kane shook his head. The risk is too great. If you succeed in disrupting the integration network, both species become vulnerable to devourer consumption. Then you'd better hope I fail. Reynolds lowered his weapon. 12 hours. You have 12 hours to reach Goldstone and implement your plan. After that, we come for you. Deal. Tommy grabbed my arm as we moved toward the exit. Jake, you realize this is suicide. Even if the EMP doesn't kill you, the devourers will arrive in 11 days and consume everything organic in the solar system. I thought about my father, about the hollow thing he'd become in those final months, about the choice between dying as yourself or living as something else wearing your face. Maybe, I said, but at least it'll be our choice to make. Outside, integration sites pulsed with bioluminescent light across a darkening sky. We had 11 hours to drive across half the country and save humanity from salvation, or die trying to give them the right to choose their own destruction. Either way, we were running out of time to remain human. The stolen Humvee's engine screamed across the Nevada desert at speeds that would have impressed test pilots. Tommy white-knuckled the steering wheel while I worked frantically on the tablet, calculating power requirements and transmission frequencies for the most dangerous equipment modification in human history. Integration checkpoints ahead, Tommy called out, pointing to flashing lights blocking Interstate 40 near Barstow. Through the windshield, I could see military vehicles surrounding what looked like medical tents. Lines of civilians waited patiently for processing, their faces blank with the kind of serene acceptance that meant the refugees' influence had already spread this far west. Take the mining road, south through Calico. That adds 2 hours to our drive time. Better than adding eternity to our integration time. Tommy yanked the wheel hard right, sending us bouncing across desert hardpan toward the abandoned ghost town that had become our only route to Goldstone. Behind us, searchlights swept the highway, but we were already lost in the maze of Joshua trees and mining equipment that dotted the landscape like metallic scarecrows. My secure phone rang. Reynolds. Jake, you have 8 hours remaining. Our monitoring stations show increasing devourer activity near Jupiter. Their advanced scouts are accelerating toward Earth. Good to know. The integration process is 97% complete globally. Resistance centers have been neutralized in all major population areas. You and Tommy represent the last unintegrated humans with technical expertise sufficient to threaten our defensive preparations. I looked at Tommy, focused intently on navigating washed-out mining roads by moonlight. What about Australia? Asia? Complete integration as of 40 minutes ago. Jake, you're driving toward a facility that's defended by 30 integrated personnel with full knowledge of your plans and capabilities. Then I guess it's going to be an interesting evening. It doesn't have to be. Pull over, walk away from the vehicle. Integration teams will be at your location within 30 minutes. You'll retain your consciousness, your memories, everything that makes you human. Except the right to choose. Except the illusion that individual choice matters more than species survival. I hung up and turned to Tommy. How close are we? 20 minutes, maybe 15 if this piece of shit holds together. Tommy glanced at the fuel gauge hovering near empty. Jake, assuming we reach Goldstone, assuming we get past their defenses, assuming we can modify the array without being stopped. He paused. What makes you think disrupting the integration network won't just make things worse? Because worse is letting someone else decide what humanity becomes. I thought about Linda, probably sitting in some integration facility in Phoenix right now. Her consciousness slowly blending with alien refugees who'd already survived one apocalypse by abandoning everything that made them who they were. Tommy, my dad spent 8 months dying in pieces. Every day, a little less of him remained until the end. He was just biological machinery keeping pain alive. That's not the same thing as... It's exactly the same thing. The refugees aren't offering us survival. They're offering us the chance to die slowly while something else wears our faces. Tommy nodded grimly and pressed harder on the accelerator. The Goldstone complex appeared over a ridge at 3:47 a.m., its familiar profile silhouetted against the star-filled desert sky. But something was wrong. The main dish was pointed directly at Earth instead of deep space, and bioluminescent growth covered the support structures like alien ivy. They've integrated the facility, Tommy said, and not all of it. I pointed to the smaller dishes around the complex perimeter. Look at dish 34, still pointing at the coordinates Webb gave us, still trying to monitor whatever's coming through Jupiter space. We abandoned the Humvee half a mile from the security perimeter and approached on foot, using maintenance tunnels I'd crawled through during equipment upgrades over the past 4 decades. The underground access points were unchanged. Apparently, the refugees hadn't bothered learning about human infrastructure beyond the obvious control systems. Danny Kovac met us in the sub-basement equipment room, but his eyes held that familiar, reflective quality. Hello, Jake. We've been expecting you. Danny? I kept my voice level despite the sinking feeling in my chest. I'm still Danny, still your friend, still the guy who taught you how to calibrate phase arrays back in 1987. Danny's smile was genuine, but underneath it lurked something vast and patient. I'm just more now. More than I was 6 hours ago. When did they get to you? About 20 minutes after your transmission, government vehicles arrived with integration specialists who explained exactly what you were planning. Danny gestured toward the equipment racks surrounding us. Jake, I've seen what's coming through Jupiter space. The Devourers aren't just consuming worlds. They're consuming the quantum foundations of space-time itself. Reality becomes unstable in their wake. Tommy raised the service pistol we'd liberated from Goddard. Step back, Danny. Tommy, you can't shoot your way past integrated consciousness. Kill this body, and I'll transfer to another one. There are 30 of us in the complex, and we all share the same determination to prevent you from destroying humanity's only chance at survival. By taking away our right to choose that survival for ourselves. Danny's expression turned sad. Jake, individual consciousness is an evolutionary dead end. We learned that 3 million years ago when the Devourers found our homeworld. Collective integration allows information, experience, and identity to survive beyond biological destruction. As what? As copies, as echoes of what we used to be. As something better. Danny activated a wall-mounted display showing real-time feeds from around the globe. Every integrated human retains their core personality while gaining access to our collective knowledge and experience. Your friend Linda in Phoenix is still Linda. She still loves terrible romantic comedies and puts too much cream in her coffee. She's just also a 3-million-year-old refugee who knows how to survive cosmic-scale threats. The display showed Linda standing in what looked like an integration facility, her face serene as she worked alongside other humans to construct defensive installations. She looked peaceful, content, happy even. But she also looked like someone else wearing Linda's face. "Where are Webb's access codes?" Danny asked. I pulled out the tablet showing the modification protocols. "Right here, along with 43 years of system knowledge and the security clearances to implement changes without triggering lockout protocols. Jake, don't do this. The electromagnetic pulse you're planning will sever integration connections globally. 8 billion humans will be forced back into individual consciousness, just as the Devourers reach Earth. They'll face extinction alone, afraid and completely unprepared for what's coming. They'll face it as themselves." Danny sighed. "Then you force us to stop you." The equipment room filled with integrated personnel, technicians I'd worked with for decades, security guards I'd shared coffee with during long night shifts, even Dr. Martinez from the medical facility who'd set my broken wrist 3 years ago. All of them wore familiar faces. All of them looked at me with alien patience. 30-2, Danny said. "Even if you reach the main control room, even if you implement the modifications, we can override the system remotely. Not if I destroy the remote access nodes first." I pulled the pin from the emergency demolition charge Tommy had rigged to the tablet. Standard protocol for classified equipment. If the device was compromised, it would destroy itself and everything within a 20-foot radius. "Jake, don't!" The explosion tore through the equipment room, severing power and communications to the main control systems. Emergency lighting bathed everything in red, while Tommy and I fought our way through smoke and debris toward the surface access tunnels. Behind us, Danny's voice called out with desperate urgency. "The Devourers are 8 hours out. You're condemning both species to extinction." We reached the main dish control room as the first scout ships entered Earth's atmosphere. Through the reinforced windows, I could see objects the size of aircraft carriers descending through clouds that rippled and distorted under impossible gravitational effects. "Jake, hurry!" Tommy worked frantically to restore power while I accessed the array modification protocols. Whatever those things are, they're not waiting for an invitation. The main dish began rotating toward its new target, Earth's magnetic field generator deep beneath the planet's crust. One massive electromagnetic pulse, perfectly timed and focused, could disrupt the quantum entanglement holding 8 billion integrated consciousnesses together. "Modification complete," I announced, charging capacitors for full power transmission. Outside, the Devourer scouts touched down in population centers around the globe. The integrated humans fought back with coordinated precision, their collective knowledge allowing them to deploy defensive technologies no single human consciousness could have comprehended. But it wasn't enough. The Devourers began consuming everything organic they encountered, converting biological matter into additional scout vessels with mechanical efficiency. "Jake," Tommy whispered, "look at the integration sites." The bioluminescent installations were going dark one by one as their organic components were absorbed into the Devourer fleet. Linda's facility in Phoenix winked out of existence. Mike's auto shop in Flagstaff became fuel for alien expansion. 8 billion integrated humans died in minutes, their collective consciousness scattered as the infrastructure holding it together was consumed. "Fire the pulse," Tommy said. I looked at the activation switch. The EMP would free the survivors from integration, but there were so few left. Maybe a few 100,000 in remote areas the Devourers hadn't reached yet. I pressed the switch. Earth's magnetic field collapsed for 17 seconds, long enough to sever every remaining integration connection on the planet. Somewhere in the darkness, the last unprocessed humans suddenly found themselves alone in their own minds for the first time in days. Just in time to watch the Devourers finish consuming their world. Tommy and I died together as the control room was consumed, but we died as ourselves. My name is Sophia Hendricks, and I'm broadcasting this message from the Atacama Large Millimeter Array in Chile. It's been 6 months since the Devourer ships finished converting Earth's organic matter into additional fleet components and departed for the Andromeda Galaxy. I'm one of maybe 300 humans who survived the integration process and the subsequent consumption event. We were scattered across remote research stations when both catastrophes struck, too isolated for the refugees to reach us, too insignificant for the Devourers to bother with during their brief feeding cycle. The Earth below us is beautiful in the way that dead things can be beautiful. The oceans have crystallized into vast sheets of metallic glass. The continents are geometric patterns of processed minerals arranged with alien precision. At night, the surface glows with bioluminescent traces left behind by the conversion process. Sometimes I pick up radio signals from other survivors. Dr. Yuki Tanaka at the International Space Station lasted 3 months before his air recycling systems failed. Professor James McReady transmitted from an Antarctic research bunker until the power generators gave out last week. Each of us has become a voice in the void, maintaining human civilization through stories and memories broadcast into space that no longer listens. But there's something else out here with us. 3 days ago, our deep space monitoring equipment detected transmission patterns that match the original web broadcasts. The same underlying rhythms, the same mathematical sequences, the same desperate attempt at communication. Except now they're coming from the direction of the Magellanic Clouds, 37,000 light-years away. The refugees survived. Somehow, somewhere, a fragment of their collective consciousness escaped both integration and consumption. And they're trying to warn us about something new. I've been analysing their transmissions using equipment Jake Thornton would have recognised. The signal processing techniques, the frequency analysis methods, all concepts he pioneered during those final desperate days at Goldstone. In a way, he's still here, still listening to the universe's secrets through instruments he helped design. The refugee signals describe another wave of cosmic predators moving through galactic space. Not devourers this time, but something that feeds on information itself, consuming data, memories, and consciousness while leaving physical matter untouched. They call them the erasers, and according to the transmissions, they're following the devourer fleet's trail toward local galactic space. The math is simple. The devourers consumed Earth 6 months ago. The erasers are approximately 18 months behind them. When they arrive, they'll strip away every trace of human knowledge, every digital record, every transmitted signal that proves we ever existed. After that, there will be nothing left of humanity except processed minerals arranged in geometric patterns on a dead world orbiting a star with no name. I've been using the ALMA array to broadcast our collected human knowledge toward potentially habitable worlds in the Kepler catalogue. Literature, music, mathematics, history, everything we can compress into transmission packages and launch towards civilizations that might not even exist yet. If anyone receives these signals, you'll know that humans lived for roughly 300,000 years on the third planet of a yellow star in a galaxy we called the Milky Way. You'll know we created art and science and love and sorrow. You'll know we faced impossible choices between survival and identity, and that we chose to die as ourselves rather than live as something else. Most importantly, you'll know that when the great predators come hunting through cosmic space, neither transformation nor resistance guarantees survival. Sometimes the universe doesn't offer good choices. Sometimes it offers only the right to choose how your species ends. The erasers will arrive in approximately 14 months. I'll keep broadcasting until then, maintaining humanity's last voice in a cosmos that has grown very quiet. This is Sophia Hendricks, final curator of human knowledge, signing off. Remember us.